Just by show of hands, how many of you or your loved ones actually have met with the Department of Justice and provided testimony and evidence? None. And of those of you who have not met, which is everyone, how many of you have reached out either individually or through a lawyer or representative to offer to provide testimony and evidence? All of them.
When witnessing this moment, you might wonder who these women are, why they are present, and why the answer to that question matters so deeply. The women seated in those back rows were survivors of Jeffrey Epstein. For many years, they had sought to contact the Department of Justice. They had sent letters. They had sought meetings through their legal representatives. They had been denied access. Then, on February 11, 2026, they found themselves gathered in the same room, seated directly behind Attorney General Pam Bondi, close enough to meet her gaze. But this story is not about their presence in that room. It is about the documents Representative Dan Goldman placed before everyone. An 86-page prosecution memorandum, a draft indictment, and an email from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell that included remarks Donald Trump had made regarding his past association with Epstein. Goldman had personally examined each of these records, and he posed a single question to Bondi. Why do these documents remain redacted? Bondi responded with only one word, but the true answer could be seen in the women seated behind her.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Bondi, I went over to the department yesterday for a couple of hours to review some of the unredacted materials. And I am looking forward to your detailed explanation for why you have withheld almost half of the documents, which is required by the bill. Now, obviously, there are 3 million documents, so I didn't get through much. But one thing I didn't see was the client list that you said you had on your desk a year ago. I did, however, find a couple of important documents. An 86-page prosecution memo from the Southern District of New York, and a draft indictment from Florida against Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirators. For reasons that I cannot understand nor are permitted by the bill, they were still redacted, even for members of Congress. So, Ms. Bondi, will you commit right here to immediately providing those two documents in unredacted form to members of Congress? Not a complicated question.
Well, I guess it is for you because you have a law degree and those are privileged.
Okay, they're not privileged, but we will discuss that later. I also found an email that I have right here from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell that was unredacted, and it included notes of statements that Donald Trump made about his prior relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, there is no reason for this to be hidden from the American people. There is no privilege, there is no attorney-client privilege, and I see you're checking with your staff, and I can assure you, staff, this is not under attorney-client privilege because it was sent from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell. Will you commit to publicly providing the unredacted version of this so that the American people can understand the extent of Donald Trump's lies about his relationship with JeffreyEpstein?
You're about as good of a lawyer today as you were when you tried to impeach President Trump in 2016. Have you apologized for that in 2019?
So will you unredact this? Will you
were
unredact
lead
this?
counsel on that. Privileged.
I'm asking you, will you unredact this?
Privileged.
Privileged, of course.
Goldman pushed the documents aside because the most important question required him to face a different audience. Bondi could answer with the word privileged, but that explanation would not satisfy the women seated directly behind her.
I look forward to discussing this more. Now, these are obviously improper redactions.
Well, and let me stop for a minute.
I'm talking.
If they're not privileged,
quiet.
Don't yell at me. If they're not
Mr. Chairman, would you stop the clock? This is on your time. It's not on Mr. Goldman.
Even though you used your improper redactions,
you'll like my answer.
To continue to protect
time belongs to the member.
We'll be happy to release them.
Yeah, we'll stop the clock. We'll stop the clock. Time belongs to the member. Go ahead.
Even though you used improper redactions to protect Donald Trump and other predators associated with Jeffrey Epstein, you did the exact opposite thing with the survivors and victims of this scheme. So their identification information was really the only thing required to be redacted, and it was not. And it's clear this was not a mistake. This was not by accident. This was not because you only had 30 days when you really used 75, and that doesn't even include all the hours last March that you were redacting it. But I'll tell you why it's clear it wasn't a mistake. There is an email entitled Epstein Victim List. There are 32 names. One is redacted, 31 are not. So someone looked at it and decided to redact something. And I will tell you that that is clearly intentional to intimidate these survivors and victims. Now, in an interview last week—
How will you tell me that's intentional?
In an interview last week, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche—
You can't go off script.
said that any victim that wants to speak with the department has done so, hopefully. Well, thanks to the incredibly brave people sitting here behind you, we can actually ask them if that's true. Now, would the survivors and victims who are here please stand up one more time? Just by show of hands, how many of you or your loved ones actually have met with the Department of Justice and provided testimony and evidence? None. And of those of you who have not met, which is everyone, how many of you have reached out either individually or through a lawyer or representative to offer to provide testimony and evidence? All of them. And of those of you, all of you who have reached out, how many of you were denied or ignored by the Department of Justice? All of them. And despite the shameful and despicable efforts by Ms. Bondi and her department to intimidate you, how many of you are still willing to speak to the Department of Justice? All of them. Well, Ms. Bondi, it looks like you have some more witnesses to talk to.
Gentleman's time has expired.
And I yield back.
Think about that for a moment. Seated directly behind Pam Bondi were survivors connected to the Epstein case, women who had spent years being overlooked by the very institutions meant to deliver justice. Yet on that day, inside that hearing room, they were only a few feet away from her. Despite their presence, Pam Bondi never once turned to face them. That was not a simple mistake or an accidental omission. This was not an accident. It was a deliberate decision. In a nation that has long presented itself as a defender of justice and the rule of law, these women were effectively told, your voices do not matter. Your stories are not being heard. For years, they sought answers and accountability. For years, they were met with closed doors. Then, when they finally occupied the same room as the Attorney General of the United States, she never turned to acknowledge them. Generations of Americans who served in conflicts from World War II to Korea and Vietnam, many of whom returned carrying lifelong physical and emotional scars, placed their faith in the belief that the justice system exists for everyone, not only the influential, but also the forgotten. What unfolded in that hearing room revealed how vulnerable that faith has become. Restoring greatness is not achieved through slogans. It requires action and responsibility. And that responsibility starts with recognizing and confronting the experiences of these women. That day, two different lists stood at the center of attention. One consisted of redacted records, an 86-page prosecution memorandum, a draft indictment, and an email containing remarks about Trump's relationship with Epstein. Much of that information remained concealed, even from members of Congress. The second list contained the names of Epstein's survivors. There were 32 names in total, 31 visible and 1 withheld. Before continuing, I want to ask for your support. Most people who watch this channel have not yet subscribed. If you find this content valuable, please subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support is what makes independent journalism possible. If you value this work, subscribing, liking, and commenting helps ensure these stories continue to be told. Now, back to the story. When Goldman compared those two lists side by side, a clear pattern emerged that was difficult to dismiss. The Department of Justice's redactions did not appear arbitrary. Certain influential figures remained shielded, while the identities of survivors received far less protection. Meanwhile, the women who had spent years seeking answers, writing letters, making requests, and asking for meetings, were never granted meaningful access. According to Goldman, this was not a simple oversight. It was not a clerical error, nor an unfortunate misunderstanding. The explanation that every victim had been contacted by the DOJ quickly unraveled under scrutiny. Question after question produced the same response, exposing major gaps in that claim. This is how trust in institutions begins to erode, when records remain hidden, when legitimate questions are left unanswered, and when those most affected cannot secure even a single meeting with the people responsible for delivering justice. With that context in mind, let's turn to what was being said beyond the walls of that hearing room.
Now joining us, Epstein survivor Lisa Phillips. Lisa, thank you so much for being with us. Have you been contacted by DOJ for another interview?
No, I haven't.
Have you offered yourself up?
I think all of us have. Yeah. I mean, we would like to be interviewed and talk to them. But I mean, so many victims have reached out over the last 30 years, and nothing has been investigated from those emails and from those calls.
I wonder, because yesterday she was asked, she said that she wants to hear from you guys. Pam Bondi did. And then Dan Goldman had the survivors stand up and then say whether they've been contacted. And nobody had been contacted. And as you said, all of them, everybody has offered their presence at DOJ and still. So I just wondered, after yesterday, if maybe a phone call came after this hearing.
No, of course not. No. The good thing is, though, the public has finally seen what the victims have been going through. And you just said it, too. The right, left, center, even right-wing influencers, everyone's eyes are wide open now. So that's the bright side, is you get to see the dismissiveness, the personal attacking members of Congress with the victim standing right behind her. And just to stand there and have these representatives, I mean, really angrily saying to her, turn around, look at them, apologize to them. They're standing right there. And her just being like, nope, we don't care. For me, who, I speak out for survivors. It's the whole reason why I do all of this. We just don't represent, the 10 of us standing there. We represent the 1,200 plus victims of Epstein and his co-conspirators. And we represent millions of survivors around the world who are watching, who have a story in them, that want to speak out, and then they realize, oh, why should we speak out? Our Attorney General, the Attorney General of the United States, won't even acknowledge the victim standing behind. It was just so re-traumatizing.
On that day, Goldman presented 3 key documents: an 86-page prosecution memorandum, a draft indictment, and an email that reportedly contained remarks concerning Trump. All 3 documents remained heavily redacted. At the same time, of the 32 names listed among Epstein's victims, 31 were publicly visible, while only 1 remained concealed. The women who had spent years trying to communicate with the Department of Justice, sending letters, seeking meetings, and asking to be heard, were repeatedly denied access. And when Pam Bondi found herself in the same room as those women, seated directly behind her, she chose not to turn around. Instead, she looked ahead and dismissed the situation as theatrics. Yet one central question remained unresolved. What exactly was contained in the email from Epstein to Maxwell regarding Donald Trump? That information remains hidden behind redactions, leaving the public without a clear answer. If you've stayed with this story until the end, thank you. Independent accountability journalism depends on people who are willing to pay attention, engage with the facts, and share important information with others. If you found this video valuable, consider subscribing and supporting the channel. Every subscription helps make future investigations and reporting possible.